have a panel with us today I'm very excited about, and we have Assemblyman Howard Watts, that is the chair of the Natural Resource Committee in the Nevada Legislature. We have Nevada Division of Water Resources State Engineer Adam Sullivan, and we have Central Nevada Regional Water Authority Executive Director Jeff Fontaine. So basically with this panel, we're going to give each panel member, like we did with the vet panel, they'll have 10 to 15 minutes to discuss what's going on, things they'd like to discuss with this crowd, and then we will go into a Q&A session. So we're going to run down the list as how it's stated on the agenda. So we're going to start with Assemblyman Watts.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I'm glad to be here with you all today. Again, Howard Watts, I represent Assembly District 15 in Southern Nevada in the Las Vegas area. I served as the chair of the Natural Resources Committee in the Assembly last legislative session, and as the chair of the Interim Natural Resources Committee. Even before I entered the legislature, I've been working on water issues across kind of southern and eastern Nevada, and so it's become a passion area of mine in the legislature as well. I guess to jump right into the issues that came up in the Interim Natural Resources Committee, and that I'm going to be working on and focused on during the next legislative session. As a representative of Southern Nevada, I think one of the biggest things in my mind are issues along the Colorado River. You know, it has been declining for over 20 years, and the last couple of years in particular have been pretty dramatic. You know, there have been calls from the federal government to reduce usage along the river by about 2 million acre feet over the next year in order to get the river back into balance. So conservation in Southern Nevada and across the Colorado River is a critical issue. Last legislative session, I worked with the Southern Nevada Water Authority, conservation groups, and others to pass policy calling for the removal of non-functional turf in Southern Nevada. So identifying decorative grass that isn't serving a purpose in a park, in a playground, on a golf course, but is just there for aesthetic purposes, and removing that. You know, Southern Nevada, because of where it's located, has a water recycling system. All of our wastewater that goes through the sewer system is treated, released into Lake Mead, and then can be drawn and treated to drinking standards and delivered back to customers again, and the community again. But water used on grass is lost permanently, and it was determined that that was something that not only had a high kind of cost to our water system in terms of losses, but also had a relatively low value in terms of just being there for aesthetic purposes. You know, we've continued to have conversations about what else can we do in Southern Nevada to reduce the urban water usage footprint. And you know, one of the issues that's been identified is legacy septic systems in particular in Southern Nevada. There's thousands of them. Many of them, not all, but many came in at a time when our community was a lot smaller, a lot more rural. Now those areas are surrounded by the urban footprint. And again, that water is not only starting to increase the nitrate levels in the groundwater of the Las Vegas area, but it's also water that's not entering our recycling and return system. So we also, one of the things that we're balancing is, it's easy to say that we need to address that, but we also have to acknowledge that there's a financial cost to that. and assist customers in making that transition, because I don't think it's responsible for us to force a bill of thousands of dollars upon someone. And we do have some opportunities with federal funding and other resources to help move that project along. So really looking at how we can continue to be a leader in Southern Nevada. I know that there are tensions between different communities. There's tensions between different sectors, urban agriculture, urban rural agriculture, municipal. And the way that I look at this is, it is the responsibility of our community to lead the way and not wait for others to take action, but be out on the forefront, encouraging other urban communities across the West, and other sectors to conserve, but not asking for others to do it first, but leading by example instead. So that is one of the major issues, and I'm working at identifying any other issues outside of septic systems that we can tackle in Southern Nevada to get our water footprint down and our per person usage of water down. So I think that's one area that we're looking at is reducing our overall usage and continuing to serve as a leader in the Colorado River Basin. Looking statewide, one of the biggest issues that came up and was discussed over the course of last year was a recent court ruling about the management of water in the Lower White River flow system. I know the state engineer may speak about this a bit as well, but there are a lot of different aspects to the decision, and potential impacts in our relatively new foray into conjunctive management of ground and surface water, recognizing that there are connections between groundwater and surface water, and trying to manage appropriately to avoid depleting those resources. Also, another issue is of our hydrographic basins. We now know that different basins have connections to each other. And so looking at each one in a silo may not always be the best approach, because uses or impacts in one basin can affect the resource in neighboring basins. So how do we adjust to that? There's also questions of process, the way that science gets incorporated into some of those processes. And so that is the other issue that we're trying to look at. Ultimately, my opinion, especially as a legislator, is that we can choose to try and come together. And I have years of experience. I understand that these can be difficult issues, especially when you get into the details. The fact is that water is a scarce resource here. And both as we look to protect it, but also as we look at areas that have been over allocated, or areas where there have been depletions and negative impacts, it's a game where somebody's going to lose. We're looking at subtractions in order to try and be sustainable for the long term. I feel like our goal is to try and do that in a way that is equitable, that is fair, and that is consistent with the overall foundation of our water law. We are fortunate that compared to some other states, we have a pretty strong and robust set of water law. And I think we need to figure out how we continue to incorporate our evolving science and knowledge of how the resource works, and use that to make sure that every community in the state can continue to move forward. Of course, when we look at some of those issues, if you start combining priority dates that were once kind of considered separate, you basically have two choices. You can kind of mix up, you can decide to try and change how water works outside of the traditional water rights framework. I've heard a lot of people concerned about that, and that's not really something that I'm interested in looking at. But that means the other alternative is that all of a sudden, folks who would have been more secure and more senior in their priority, when we look at the updated science, may now be in a larger kind of hydrographic region, and there may be impacts to that. So that's something that I'm trying to work on, to be have an open and inclusive process, to get folks feedback on how they'd like to see some of these overall problems addressed. They're all going to get litigated. The question is, are we going to provide some policy guidance for how some of these things get resolved, or are we going to throw up our hands and leave it all to the courts to decide? And I think that and hope that we can get different stakeholders on board with creating a bit of a guideline for how some of these decisions and operations should look moving forward. So those are kind of the two key policy efforts that I am focused on moving forward. I've seen that there are many bills being introduced related to water. I don't know what all of them are, but it seems like we are going to have a robust discussion, which is good. We need to take continued action to steward this resource for the future. I am extremely excited about the strong winter that we've had and are having currently. We had a great December last year, and then a completely dry January. And even if we have a tremendous winter, that does not solve our problems. We need to make sure that we have a water management policy that, again, is going to be sustainable for every single community and every single sector in the state. And that's what I'm interested in working on this session and beyond.